Thank you for staying with us. Now, the federal government has declared a national emergency on food security as record inflation has made basic food unaffordable for many. And that has pushed malnutrition rates, of course, to the precipice. Food prices jumped after the removal of a long-held, costly fuel subsidy. Officials say they will use those funds instead for the agricultural sector and to provide fertilizers and grains to farmers and households struggling with high prices. The President's advisor on special duties, communication and strategy, Mr. Dele Alaki, announced the emergency during a news conference on Thursday in Abuja after a meeting with the President. He said the decision came in response to inflation and the inability of Nigerian citizens to afford basic food items. What's this all about? Let's take it on this morning with a panel of guests. Abdulaziz Musa of Oxfam, Nigeria. He's on our panel this morning along with Ehioma Chijoke, both of them joining us this morning. Chijoke Ehioma is from the Female Food Hero. Abdulaziz Musa of Oxfam, Nigeria. Join us along with Ayodele Gbolagade, a professor of agricultural economics and policy. He's also president, Farm and Infrastructure Foundation. He's chairman as well of Voices for Food Security. He's a member of He's a member and committee chair, Nigeria Zero Hunger Forum, as well as Saidat Shonoiki, executive director and founder, Green Skill Center. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning on the program. Let me begin with you, Prof. The President made this declaration about food security on Thursday, and of course, it's got a lot of people talking already. For you, first of all, how necessary is it? How important is it? How workable is it, Professor Ayola Gbolagade? That's for you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians. We woke up to this good news a couple of nights ago, and the first thing we should do is to commend President Tinubu for the courage he has summoned to do this. It is long overdue that the hunger situation in Nigeria has reached a crisis stage. And this is the first president to escalate the status of that crisis to that of an emergency. So it's rightly done, and we appreciate him for that. Even to the extent that he escalated the status of food security to that of national security, and is an item on the table today of the National Security Council. Having said that, it's a welcome development. To declare a state of emergency on food security means what? It means waging a war against hunger, like many successful countries have done in the past. And we believe this is workable. It's important for Nigeria to do the same, and we are having a president that is taking the right foot forward along that line. However, we notice a gap, and we notice some absence of sharp targeting of the instrumentality of this war. The gap we noticed is that, one, reference was not made at all to the newly passed and newly enacted Right to Food Act, which is a law.
Prof, we'll come to all those other gaps in a bit. My apologies. We'll come to all those other gaps. I just wanted to get the opening comments of everyone, because, of course, the gap that you mentioned is quite significant. How does that line up with this declaration of the president? Has that law been factored into it as well? A number of other things we'll consider. But let me also ask Madam Saidat Shonoiki as well, who is Executive Director and founder at Green Skill Center. How did you receive that news from the president about declaring an emergency on food security? That's for you, Mrs. Shonoiki.
Well, it's long overdue. And I think part of the thing he has promised us as a renewed hope. And we all know what is already happening in the market about the food inflation. So it's a real welcome development that government is taking this issue as one of the priority. So we are very happy, and I've gone through the statement from Mr. Alake. So it's a welcome development, and there are areas that are very paramount that they have talked about. So you said we are going to come back to the gap. So I will mention all the gaps I've seen as an implementer in projects that I think it should be part of the thing that they have lined up.
Okay, well,
so
clearly,
that's welcome developing.
Ms. Ihioma Chijoke, one may not really be able to fully consider everything, in one go. Well, those gaps will most certainly be significant. But from where you sit as a female food hero, how do you see this playing out? Do you even have confidence that people will trust the fact that, okay, government has decided to do this, and consequently they will follow government to it? There has been a number of times when governments at the federal or state levels have made, announcements such as this, but that's all it was. That's just it, an announcement and nothing else. Are you confident that the federal government will get the requisite or the required cooperation or participation from both the states and the private sector?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians. From my side as a farmer, I am not in that the government has been making such comments and they have not been following it for a very long time now. So the confidence, it's at very low. It's still very low, like 20%. We the farmers don't have the confidence, because most of the times when they make such comments and we are excited waiting for them to act, the state actors will be nowhere. You will see them, it's only the fake farmers, it will just float. You only hear, it will not get to the rural farmers. And at the rural area, that is where the production of food is being done. But the rural farmers will not have effect. There will be no such effect on the rural farmers. So telling us now that this is going to happen, yes, we are excited, but will it really get to us? Okay. Will it really get to the farmers? Will the farmers have opportunity of being elevated of our suffering, of the poverty rate, of the hike in price in markets? Look at the price of fertilizer this year. I don't know what we are going to produce this year, but we're still hoping that with this, that there will be a relief for farmers.
Well, thank you. Let me ask you, Mr. Abdulaziz Musa, the crucial thing that has to happen, the federal government itself doesn't have land, even though we understand that some 500 hectares of land have been acquired by the federal government to champion this particular cause. It will most certainly be in various parts of the country. So the collaboration with states is no doubt an issue that is crucial. How do you see that collaboration happening? First of all, do you see it happening? And then how do you see it happening? I'm asking that question against the backdrop of the fact that in 2020, or was it 2021, the federal government came up with the economic recovery plan. And they said that the president at the time said that Nigeria could pull 100 million Nigerians out of poverty over 10 years. 4 or 5 years down the line, after the president's declaration, and he said, the president at the time said, look, this can be done with the collaboration or cooperation of the states. 3 or 4 years down the line, the much we heard was that Nigerians in poverty are 133 million. So, do you see this collaboration between the federal government today and the state governments today helping to champion this food emergency declaration of the president?
Thank you, Ayo. Good morning. Just thinking about your first comment earlier, asking us if we are taking cocoa or cocoa, as the case may be. I bet you millions of Nigerians have not divided their yesterday from today. They are still in their yesterday, meaning they've not eaten anything. And just to sort of demonstrate the gravity of the issue we are talking about. So just to reiterate, I think the declaration by the president, it's a very welcome development. It means that the federal government at last have realized that this crisis has reached a level where we need to gather all our resources to address it head on. There's a report, that said in the Global Food Security Report that indicated that from last year to this year alone, 65 million individuals have been added to the food insecure category. That is immense, and it's really not right in a world that has surplus, because we do have that surplus. But back to your question, yes, agriculture is primarily practiced in the states, in the villages, in the communities, just like Ihima mentioned. I was looking at some data yesterday, and I saw that the facilities that federal government disburse, to farmers as loans is almost above, 1 trillion naira. But then, if you look at the reality in the market, the prices and the impact doesn't really correlate, correspond with the level of investment that we've made. And these are due to several factors. And one of the key things is in terms of the participation of the right people. One of them is also the state governments. So yes, indeed, this can happen, given that it has been declared as a state of emergency. But it has to go beyond that. The federal government, we hope that before they made this announcement, they've had some level of consultations with the states, because we do not want a situation where the federal government is going this direction and the state governments are going that direction. But perhaps maybe because in this declaration, they did said that they are going to they're going to pay for this land. That is a welcome development, but I think the stakeholders that are required to implement this policy or this directive are actually aware, they are carried along, and state actors especially, who usually are the implementers of, supporting government with these policies are also carried along. One key challenge perhaps that might limit the state government's participation is the area of revenue. We all know the situation around revenue at the moment, especially with the states. So, and of course, we do not want a situation where, taxes will be raised, indiscriminately to an extent that it will now, be even more damaging to this, to the people that we're trying to support or help. Climate change is a huge, it's a reality that we're living in now. This year there's a forecast that we might even have worse flooding than last year. This says a lot. So aside from the declaration of the state of emergency, quite a lot need to be accompanied with this to make it a success.
Well, quite a number of things are also listed in that in the address by Mr. Dele-Alaki on behalf of the president. So when you talk about prices, is it any relief to you or for you that the federal government is reactivating the National Commodity Board to monitor the pricing? And when you talk about levies, are you talking about the ones that the states are going to be putting on the farmers? What exactly are you talking about there?
So, I mean, we do have so yes, when we talk about revenue generation, sometimes it's easy for us to just increase tax as governments, not minding. And from our assessments, we've seen that the poor actually are the ones that pay more taxes. Multiple taxation, and the rich, avoid tax or even evade tax. But in terms of the commodity board, that is actually very good. In the past, we've had the NAF, the National Agricultural Resilience Framework. Part of that policy also incorporates the issues around the strategic grain reserves. And it's at 3 levels: at the community level, at which is local governments, at the state level, and at the federal level. And what that means, or what part of the requirement of that policy, is that federal government, along with states and local governments, will set aside funds to mop up excesses from farmers, and store them in the strategic grain reserves. Because if you notice, during harvest, farmers are really shortchanged. The big, middlemen would come and with their monies and just buy this, goods from farmers at a very minimum price, and the farmers don't end up making any profit, and they store them until, these goods are not available, and they bring it out to make maximum profit. So government is supposed to, by that policy, they're supposed to actually regulate that volatility of price, and in a way also ensure that the farmer who invests his time and energy gets the reward out of it. So yes, again, these are not new pronouncements, as far as we're concerned, but the implementation is the key. They say the devil is in the details. So we're really looking forward to see how this is going to be implemented. Obviously, we cannot continue to do the same things, and expect different results. So we are really hopeful that, the way from these pronouncements, that things would also take shape. By this declaration, it means it's a war. Taking, for example, from Ukraine, you've seen that everybody has been mobilized, to fight in that war. Okay. So we also, as we've realized that this is a threat to our collective being as a country, it then therefore means that everybody, the citizens, and unfortunately you asked a question earlier in terms of citizens' trust, the trust is really minimal. And you can see from even the recent happenings in the polity, with the JAMB, and the election, people don't really believe government when they say things. So we really need to demonstrate that goodwill and that commitment to ensure that everybody that needs to contribute to the success of this policy is carried on board.
Yeah. Let me come to you, Prof. I mean, you were talking about some gaps the other time, and of course, I'm pretty sure you've listened to Mr. Musa, on his own positions. Part of the thoughts of the federal government is for a strong collaboration between the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Water Resources. How, in your opinion, do you see that really playing out? Of course, you may want to talk about those gaps that you talked about now, but is that a gap in itself, or you see it as something that will really help to fast-track the food production process, the function of bringing the agricultural and water resources ministries together? Is for the water resources ministries to provide infrastructure, perhaps, for the irrigation processes, particularly for the 500,000 hectares that the federal government has assigned. So do you see that as a gap, or something that also needs to be factored into other things, which may include the gaps that you talked about the other time?
Thank you. Let us generally contextualize the gap we are talking about, so we can go into the specifics about the nature of each type of gap that we have noticed. Generally, the first gap that we noticed is the absence of a copious reference to the Right to Food Act. Right to Food Act is a new development which fortuitously had prepared the ground for the present administration to declare this war, fight it, and win it. I am very sensitive to this omission because my own organization, in collaboration with others, were instrumental to following this, the trajectory of this act right from 2010, when we entered the National Assembly, through the 6th Assembly, 7th Assembly, 8th Assembly, 9th Assembly to get it passed, and assented to by Mr. President. Now, with all that amount of labor, I was very surprised that the entire emergency declaration should have been situated within the context of that act to start with. That is one general gap. Going to the specifics, in relation to that gap itself is the fact that government emphasized the common instruments of fighting the war. And government is, in order to do that, the provision of fertilizer, the provision of irrigation services, and so on. But again, we have to contextualize that in itself. The three contexts of fighting this war and winning it is to direct the efforts of government to three areas. One is the area of technology. So government did very well in its declaration by referring to fertilizer technology, referring to irrigation technology, mechanization technology, and the like. Second point of call for that war to be fought is to direct efforts at correcting market failure, especially because the background to this emergency is food inflation. Inflation happens in the market, and if you want to use viable instrument to deal with inflation, you have to target the market. What are the sources and causes of food inflation? And what pattern can we learn from in the past in order to project solutions into the future? That is one area. I see government also doing fine in the declaration about that, because they have touched on the instrumentality of the Commodity Exchange Board, if that is what government has in mind. They also talked of the financial market by playing a role to the central bank, although some of us have reservations about that. But the major gap in that sequence of instruments that is missing is governance itself, policy governance, which ends up derailing implementation process. And we all know that policy is usually, we are not short of policy ideas in this country. Even the entire declaration of Mr. President is not unprecedented. The problem starts at implementation. And therefore, government needs to incorporate its focus on implementation process as a problem in governance, policy governance, before you can get that sequence right. That's a good point. Specific.
My apologies. Just a quick one on the issue, the first issue you raised about the Right to Food Act. Is it any comfort that, you know, the Constitution, one of the 16 bills that was signed by the Buhari government, was the 5th alteration number 34, which sought to alter the Constitution of the Federal Government of Nigeria in 1999 to require the government to direct its policy towards ensuring the right to food and food security in Nigeria and for related matters. On the one hand is the Right to Food Act, but now it's a constitutional matter. Even if you don't want to obey the law, you have no option but to obey the Constitution. You don't see this initiative by the federal government as something lining up with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria?
Yes, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. The Right to Food Act was a constitution amendment bill. So it is a constitution amendment law, which government is responsibility bound to situate all its policies towards food security and ensuring the right of Nigerians to food. So the declaration, the point I'm making there is that the declaration of emergency should have perfectly been situated in that context.
Well, anyway, that's a good point to make, Prof. But you respond to that other question, you know, I raised earlier. But let me, because still talking about the gaps, since you started on the gaps, Madam Shonoiki, you also, you know, mentioned the need to address some gaps in order for this emergency declaration by the federal government to have the required teeth. So what are these gaps that you also have noticed that you think, unless they are addressed, we will just be papering over cracks?
Yeah. The one key important area that I've noticed in the declaration is I'm not seeing a deliberate effort to address the shocks from climate change. Our Ministry of Environment, they should be part of the people that should be considered because there are policy guiding on the issue around climate change. What is causing food prices? There are reports that one of the key areas that is causing food prices is low crop yield from farmers. When I have 1 hectare, I'm getting maybe 12 tons. With the issue of climate change is reducing day by day. The inputs are increasing. And also, there's some other needs I need to be met. When I harvest those produce, I'm going to spread the cost across this. And remember also, there are demand for some certain products from outside. So there are, small available things for we, the Nigerians, to consume. So the issue of climate change is not really being addressed. What are the practices that we are going to see that farmers are going to adopt on their farms to, to address this climate change? In last year, there are a lot of land that's been affected from flood. What is the recovery process? And they talk about fertilizers. Good. But what kind of fertilizers? There should be some demand, some effort towards ecological organic agriculture. We have seen on all parts of the world, people are making deliberate effort around climate issue. In UK, there's what we call ELMS, environmental land management. In EU, there are policies that by 2030, part of our food will come from ecological organic practice because they want to restore their soil. We are facing issue of drought, issue of flood. So what are the real skills we are going to put out there for these farmers? I know about green alternative policy that was launched by the last administration about climate smart agriculture. Are these farmers going to adopt all these things? So it's a major issue we need to address, that we have sufficient food at the right price for consumers. Because as a farmer, I will spread over the cost. So I also saw in the one of the point that they are going to move to forests and clear some of the land. And you all know that trees is one of shock absorber for climate issue. This need to be profiled. We cannot just go into land and start destroying the trees. So there's need for profiling from the Ministry of Environment. They have all this data with them.
So essentially, you're saying, madam, essentially you're saying that even though the federal government has said there's going to be partnership, there has to be collaboration between the Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources. You're saying that the Ministry of the Environment also has to be involved in the process.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Now, but something that you said about, the pricing and all of those, just a quick one on that, and I'm pretty sure that Madam Chijioke will also want to speak to it, is the fact that the supply chain is largely responsible for the prices of food. The distance between the farm and the table is quite humongous, such that sometimes the cost of the food, of the entire production of the food itself, is nothing compared to the cost of moving it from the farm to the table. How do you see this emergency addressing that? Of course, one of the items of the federal government in the emergency declaration is the cost of transporting agricultural products, which has been a challenge, will also be addressed. How do you see that happening? That's for you, Ms. Shoneki. That's for Mrs. Shoneki. We'll come back to you, Madam Chijioke. That's for Mrs. Shoneki.
Okay, the issue of, supply chain is a major issue. And I don't know when this will be implemented, that we are going to put the right infrastructure in place. So we don't know when, because we know they said by this year, end of November, people will be under hunger. So when is the infrastructure going to be available for the movement of goods? for us to start implementing.
How significant is that? How significant is it? Because you talked about pricing the other time, so that's why I'm asking, because it is also a significant chunk in the price of food. How significant is it for you? You know, that it has to be considered, otherwise we may not really be able to solve the problem of food prices.
It has to be really, it has to be on, yeah, it has to be really considered.
Okay.
But I think there are ways farmers also manage these shocks in terms of logistic management. There's a way they mop up goods together in bulk. So I won't say it's of high significance, but it has to be considered. The major cost is the cost of production, of producing food. Because if people come together and they produce in large quantity, there's what we call shared risk. There's the way farmers shared risk nowadays. They bring in tractor at the same time, they share the risk. They bring in inputs, they share the risk. So I think it's of significant importance, but not really a major one. The other one I would consider is the post-harvest loss.
Okay.
And that is, how do people manage production responsibly?
Okay, so let
production and consumption.
Yes, so let us ask the farmer sitting right next to you there how they have dealt with this issue. Madam Chijoke, this is for you. And I know, I mean, you've expressed your you know, that you are not very, very sure, not very confident because of the trust quotient between between government and the people, whether federal or state. And then you've spoken about a number of other things, whether or not it will drill down to the people. But speak to the issues that farmers themselves are encountering, which the federal government may or may not be aware of. Madam Shonoike has kind of opened that discussion for you. Tell us what your experiences have been as a farmer. What are the things that you have encountered, and how do you see any intervention at all helping to ameliorate some of them?
Okay, as a farmer, post-harvest losses, like he said, has really, really affected us. The cost of moving of our goods from the farm to the market, it's a very big one. That the roads, there are no roads. So moving our goods has been very difficult. No roads from the farm to the markets. That is number one. Before you get a vehicle that will agree, it will be on a high cost. Another thing is there are no post-harvest, there are no post-harvest policies. Okay, there might be policies, but they are not on ground. We don't have silos, no storage facilities, no training on processing. Everything is just on low key. The one the government is doing is just very little. We need them to scale up, because now if I have my farms at harvest, normally we have gluts in the market. So when we have gluts in the market, nobody buys the goods. Sometimes you see farmers wasting the goods and they go. They waste their money, they waste everything, the transport, they waste in bringing the goods. When they look at also wasting transport in taking the goods back, some of them end up pouring the goods in the market and they go. And they have paid for tax, because before you enter market to sell, you will make payments. Those are the things that farmers pass through. What are the governments putting in place in this kind of thing now to cushion the effect for farmers?
Okay.
Are they coming to the farm to carry the goods?
Madam, on that, just a quick one. You spoke about transportation costs now. Part of the speech of Mr. Dele Alake from the president is in consideration of the cost of transporting agricultural products, which they say have been a major challenge due to permits, toll gates, and other associated costs. I think these things have also been put into consideration. I have seen one or two videos that have shown people flipping pages of permits and levies that they paid, moving the products from place to place. In terms of costs, what would you say is the percentage cost of transportation on food prices? Okay, maybe after producing, or Madam Shonoike also said that, you know, there's quite a significant cost you put into production of food. But what percentage of transportation and other logistics come on the food prices, just so that people can understand how severe the challenge is and how difficult it's been for food producers such as yourself?
Yes, the cost is really up to 60% of on the food prices. Because when you check your production, you start the cost from going to the market to get the seeds and the inputs. So when you get them, you will pay transport to move them to the farm. So all those things are being levied on the food price. So when you check it, it's up to 60% of the production price.
And that is just for transportation and logistics?
Yes, that is just for transportation.
Interesting. Well, Mr. Musa, let's come to you now on this particular conversation that we're having. It would seem like, you know, the problem of food security is much bigger than a number of people are aware. And this is why we are bringing this whole conversation up now, so that people will know that the whole idea of the federal government declaring an emergency on food security is not just something that needs to be declared, it is something that needs to be worked seriously at. A number of people, of course, everyone on the panel, such as with you, have mentioned gaps. What are the other gaps you have noticed? I cited I wanted you to address the federal government, states collaboration gaps or none the other time. Do you see that as significant? I ask that on two counts. Number one, the states is where the federal government have the lands. The 500,000 hectares will be in the states. The federal government does not have any piece of land on its own. The second thing, so that collaboration has to happen. The second thing is security. Each state has peculiar security challenges, and if these are not addressed significantly in that collaboration, there will be a significant challenge for the federal government, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And insecurity at the moment for us, along with climate change, poses one of the major threats for us. I mean, it's becoming a bit clear now to many people, and especially those of us living in the cities, are now becoming a bit more concerned and engaged in the conversation, because we are now feeling the pinch. In the past, like Chijuke mentioned, farmers are usually the ones that are being shortchanged. But unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, there needs to be a whole lot of collaboration, because you hear many state government governors saying that they do not control the security apparatus, for example. So how do the federal and the states work together to address the security issues? This is not a question that I might be able to answer, because this is something that has been long going. But again, there has been many recommendations in terms of solutions towards this. So certainly that needs to be addressed. If it's not addressed, if there's no life, first of all, there can't be any economic activity. Secondly, there is also the issue of the resource allocation, which is from both at the different tiers of government. And I'm afraid one of the major problems that we've always had is the issue of that governance. Even the little resources, I think for the past 7 years, we've had only about, with the budget in agriculture, at least the federal government budget has been moving between 1% and 2%. This year is a meager 1.11%, literally. So if you look at, again, then in terms of what government is saying and in terms of what government is doing, it's a little bit of, there's a bit of a discrepancy. So if you want to talk about trust, government needs to see that you're actually backing your words with actions. Yes, we can say the budget was not done by this government, but this is something that needs to happen, because you can't say you're prioritizing agriculture and then you're allocating some very meager resources towards that. You have issue of extension services. Part of why farmers also have that high loss is the almost lack of it. If farmers do not know when to apply fertilizer, for example, let me use myself as an example. I have a small farm. I went and applied fertilizer overnight. It rained heavily. Ordinarily, I should be smiling in my bed and enjoying the weather, but I was there thinking about the fertilizer that will be washed away. So if I had had information that this is going to rain today or it's going to rain tomorrow, I will know how to utilize that information apply or basically to carry out my farm activities. And you can apply this to, and this is me perhaps that I think I might even have information or have access, a certain level of access. Imagine the farmers who do not even have, say, smartphones or do not listen to the TV and all that. So that is one huge area that needs to be addressed. And all this requires resources. I think Extension Service literally, collapsed, when the World Bank funding stopped. How do we revive that? That is a huge chunk with climate change now impacting us.
I mean, you keep talking about climate change, and you and Madam Shoneike seem to have compared notes on that, but I'm not sure how, it is definitely something concerning, and let's just hope, as you both have said, that it is something that the federal government has to consider. Otherwise, we do not want a repeat of what happened last year. But speak quickly to this as we begin to wrap up this conversation now, Mr. Musa. Your own concluding thoughts, but please focus on this one. How easy is it for the private sector to not just come in, but play profitably? Particularly in light of the fact that every private sector practitioner will have to speak with the federal government and the state governments, whether or not that is you may want to advise. But how do you see the private sector coming in and playing profitably, particularly with government's policies here and there?
Nigeria is a very profitable market, and hence why you see even with our issues, we're still having some level of investments by the private sector. And what government needs to do is no rocket science, just provide the enabling environment.
Okay.
Enabling environment in terms of some certain incentives. And how do you also, and it's also the issue of the civic society. How do you also mobilize these farmers and make them market ready?
Okay.
Because again, issue of market readiness, if you do not make the farmers market ready, they will end up being exploited by this private sector. So there is a need to have regulations and policies that will really guide the activities of this private actor.
Most certainly a lot to chew on, Mr. Musa. My apologies, we're running out of time. We just want to take concluding thoughts of everybody now. Prof, what will be your final words on this conversation now? Again, I would say this is a conversation starter. We can't really conclude everything now. So what would be your final thoughts on this, Prof?
Thank you. I have a final sentence, not final word only. And that is, one, that government should take cognizance of the new act. That is one word. The second is about the pricing issue that is so much of concern to you. The best way to address escalating price in the food market is through infrastructure provision. We can't overemphasize that. Rural road network, rural water supply schemes, rural electricity, and so on. Things that will make life good for the farmer to be able to produce and transport his produce onto the market. And finally, in the aspect of the federal-state relationship in agriculture, you have made the point. Federal government does not have land on the ground. It is the state. And that is why I have blame for both federal and state. Federal government overreaches the state too much more than the Constitution permits them in the second schedule, even though they are working together in agriculture. States themselves are complacent, ever waiting for what federal government will bring before they intervene policy-wise in agriculture. That situation should be looked into in order to make the statements of this emergency more than mere platitude. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Shoneike, your final thoughts.
Okay, my final thoughts, apart from the issue of climate change I've mentioned, is the use of the right skills for us to implement this project. Yesterday I was at the World Youth Skill, and in the statement there's a plan for youths to be employed. Are we going to employ skills from outside? Do they have the right skill to deliver? So we need to focus on the skills for the youth to deliver for us. The tractors who are going to be driving it, who are going to be repairing it. And for the farmers, the climate smart agriculture is very, very key. And lastly, on the issue of our national quality infrastructure. How do our products move out without being rejected. There is a national infrastructure bill that is yet to be implemented. And lastly is our national research development bill. How do we connect research to work for us? These are issues I want federal government to look into. Skills. We don't want to import skills to us, to implement for us. So we need to look into all this and the climate change. Thank you so much.
I can imagine the number of jobs that will be created, with that comment that you just made. Madam Chijoke, your last words.
Okay, my last word is, in the course of this policy that the government is putting in place, they should be very careful. They should try and bring back the extension agents so that we, the farmers, will benefit from them. We tend to benefit more with them. And when you're talking about the private, government, private, public-private partnerships, they should not please bring back the anchor borrowers program. If there is a way they can remove it, it has really dealt with us, the farmers. It's a fraud. They have really cheated on us with that. The people that are putting it in place, the people that are bringing it, when you get yourself involved, they will give you seeds that are not viable, and they want you to pay a money that they did not give you. They will bring people that they think that those people can anchor the program, maybe seed sellers or input suppliers that they know. They will credit your account. You don't have access to the money. They withdraw it back and pay. And putting you in debt. You cannot pay back the loan. You cannot access the loan. You did not use it because what they gave you is nothing. And also that you try to mediate on those people that are bringing farmers together, because most of our farmers in FCT now are suffering from money they did not eat. They did not see the money. They just had a lot of money and they didn't use it. They didn't see it. And some group of people connived and ate the money, and the debt is on farmers. So the government should be very careful and try to work on these things so that farmers will not go back to crying again. Thank you
so much for that contribution that you all have made on this program this morning. I want to believe with all my heart that the federal government itself is listening. Ehioma Chijoke is a female food hero, as well as Saidat Shona Ike, who is Executive Director, Founder, Green Skills Center. We've also had Abdulaziz Musa of Oxfam, Nigeria, as well as Ayola Bolagade, Professor of Agricultural Economics and Policy. He's President, Farm and Infrastructure Foundation. He's Chairman, Voices for Food Security, Member and Committee Chair, Nigeria Zero Hunger Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Truly appreciate the time that you put in to be here. So we take a short break, and when we return, we're still talking about our own dear native land, Nigeria. Just stay with us.